Hello, Blogheads. This is Conn Carroll with the Washington Examiner, and I am here with
Pat Garofalo, Economic Policy Editor for ThinkProgress.org.
Great, and we're going to be talking today about Mitt Romney, inequality, housing, and the Keystone Pipeline, I believe.
All those fun economic things bouncing around the world right now.
Right. But we'll start off in South Carolina, where Mitt Romney has been pressured into possibly releasing his tax returns, probably around tax time, but he did admit yesterday that he probably pays around 15% of an effective tax rate. And of course, the Obama campaign and his super PAC immediately pounced on this.
As did Newt Gingrich.
I think you guys did too. What was your take on it? Did you write the story for ThinkProgress, or?
I did, yeah. And I also did a fortuitously timed piece in The Atlantic about private equity taxes in general that just happened to come out the same day that he made this announcement. And our take is largely, I think what a lot of people are saying is this shows some of the problems in the tax code. It shows the way that we're preferencing investment to a degree that maybe we shouldn't, when a guy who's worth $250 million and getting who knows how much is paying a rate lower than a lot of middle-class families. And I think Romney runs into trouble because he's opposed the Buffett rule, which, whether you like it on the merits or not, and we'll talk about that, is something that Obama's going to campaign on. And the Buffett rule, to remind everyone, is a rule that is not quite fully thought out yet, but the idea is to ensure that millionaires can't pay less than middle-class families. So, policy aside, the politics of that for Romney, I think, are going to look a little ugly, seeing that he pays 15% when you have a lot of middle-class families that are going to pay more than that.
Right. There's a number of places we could go from there. Let's start off with the policy. So, is it ThinkProgress? Is it the progressive position that we should be taxing investment and savings more?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure the degree to which we need a 15% rate when you have a top income tax rate of 35. I mean, you can look back in the Reagan administration, you had investment income and wage income taxed equally. I think the literature is mixed on how much of an incentive is needed for investment, but I'm not really sure you need a 20 percentage point difference to encourage people to go out and invest their money.
I'll disagree with you there. I think the literature is pretty clear that we want as low a rate on savings as investment as possible.
But do you think it really encourages investment in a way that? Do you think it's really necessary to encourage investment? I think that's the right question. That people really won't go out and invest if they're paying 20, 25.
Well, from the readings I've been seeing on why our economy isn't recovering, it's because there's a dearth of investment. There's a dearth of business investment. There's a dearth of infrastructure investment. So, yeah, I think underinvestment in businesses, new businesses, private infrastructure, public infrastructure is way too low. And so I think the exact wrong thing to do is to raise taxes on something we're already not getting enough of.
I guess this is going to go back to the classic view of the crisis, if this is a demand problem or a supply side problem. I think the more progressive liberal take is that if you get the demand back, the investment will follow.
So how does increasing taxes on investment increase demand?
Oh, it certainly doesn't, and I don't think anybody's saying we should be jacking up the capital gains tax tomorrow.
No, it sounds like that's exactly what you're proposing.
Well, no, I'm not saying we should do it tomorrow, but as a long-term economic issue, I think we should look at whether we need to have a 20 percentage point difference between the top income tax rate and the highest capital gains tax rate.
Mm-hmm. So you just think there should be a smaller distance between the two, not the capital gains tax rate. So if the taxes on earned income were dropped down to 15%, that would make you happy.
That would make me happy for different reasons, but for the thing we're talking about, yes, I'm not sure you need that big a gap to incentivize investment.
Okay, fair enough.
But I'd like to get your view on it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's flip this around. What do you think are the policy implications for this? And do you think Romney? What I'm kind of interested in is, do you think Romney has a story to tell about this that he can use to his advantage?
Yeah, I hate to sound like a Wall Street Journal page megaphone or echophone here, but I think they had it exactly right. He said basically, this is what I pay, or this is not what he said, but what the Wall Street Journal advised him to say. which is that this is the rate I pay, and I believe I want to have as many Americans pay as little as I do, which actually is already true. I mean, I know you say that many middle class American families do pay a higher effective rate than Romney does, and that is probably technically true. There's probably millions of such households that do, but most Americans actually do pay less.
No, it's totally true.
Yeah, if you look at the CBO study, and we're talking about all taxes.
As well they should, because they are worth $250 million.
Right. Yeah, and we're talking about all federal taxes here, including Social Insurance, including Medicare and Medicaid. I'm not Medicare and Social Security taxes. If you just look at income taxes, you know, if you look at the average American, the middle quintile, so I guess the bottom 60% pay only about 3% in income tax, and they end up paying about 14% in all taxes. Even lower, of course, for the bottom two quintiles. But his effective tax rate of 15%, if that is what it is, and it may turn out to be lower or higher.
Yeah, who knows if he's got that right or wrong off the top of his head.
Yeah. Right, off the, he said around, so already 14% could be around, 13%
I mean,
could be around.
When Citizens for Tax Justice did an analysis, is probably too strong a word, kind of looked at the information that's out there and guesstimated what his rate would be, they said about 14. So, I mean, I think it seems reasonable that it's going to be in that ballpark.
Right, but then you had, you know, Citizens for Tax Justice putting out this thing where it said, you know, a person that makes $60,000 pays 30% income tax rate, which is just completely BS. The number of people, the number of individuals or households in this country making $60,000 a year that are paying 30% rate is ridiculously small. It's just a complete misrepresentation of what the tax policy is. But I guess it does get back to the buffer rule, which is, I find, just completely fantasy land unenforceable, because the whole idea of it is that millionaires should pay a higher rate than other Americans, and they already do, right?
Most of them do, but I mean, if you look at, I think 2009, there were a not insignificant number of millionaires who had zero in terms of federal income tax liability. But I think you're right that the enforcement question is actually really important and really hard to answer right now, and we don't actually have anything good from the administration on how on earth they would do this. Like, are you going to go back and do you catch this in auditing? Do you catch this like 2 years later? Do you say, oh, by the way, your rate was below that of a middle class, and ask for more? I have no idea how they think they're going to do that.
Does that bother you at all? That they're focusing their entire campaign around this fictional policy that doesn't exist?
Well, I wouldn't say it's
completely enforceable.
Their entire campaign, but I am looking forward to seeing some answers on how they would pull this off.
Well, I mean, you would say, to transition a little bit, that income inequality is going to be a major push.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, I think the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, Alan Kruger, he gave a speech at the Center for American Progress, which is where I work, last week, and he seemed to, he did, the whole point of the speech was income inequality, and he seemed to be kind of laying the first stone in the foundation, if you will.
Right, well, you have Obama's speech in Kansas, which is all about income inequality. You've got David Axelrod in an email to Greg Sargent, the Washington Post, saying income inequality is going to be the defining issue of our time. So, yeah, I do think that this is going to be what Obama's going to run on, is income inequality. And I guess, well, I have two questions first. Well, number one, why do we care about this? I mean, Gallup had a poll out this week identifying about, 10, somewhere between that, let's say 15 issues that were important to people. And I believe income inequality was about 14th or 15th. It was near the bottom. This is just something that most Americans don't care about, and yet Obama is going to make it the centerpiece of his campaign. So I guess my question to you is why?
Well, I mean, I think the polls are kind of all over the place. There was also a poll this week that, when people are prompted, is the economic system tilted unfairly, they reply yes. So, I mean, I think, if you're looking at what do people care about
that's a different question than income inequality, isn't it?
Yeah. It is and it isn't. I mean, that's built in. If being like increasing income inequality means that there's potentially something going wrong. But I think the reason we care about it, and it was part of Kruger's speech, was that in the long run, increasing income inequality has the potential to gum up economic growth. The data that he broke out is that not only will you see growth potentially slow down with increasing income inequality, but also you see economic mobility go down. The countries that are more unequal have less mobility, And I mean, I think what Obama's going to do is he's going to say this flies in the face of the American dream. The idea is that Americans, if you work hard enough and you do what you're supposed to and you play by the rules, you have the opportunity to move up, and increasing income inequality has the potential to make that not happen. And we've already seen that mobility here is falling behind some of the Western European countries when that wasn't the case a few decades ago.
Well, I think first of all, the issue is, or a better issue would be, equality of opportunity. I mean, that's when you look at the Republican rhetoric, right? It's matched. It's matched in that sense. You have.
I actually do have a question about that. I'm sorry to interrupt. Swing back. Because Romney is saying that Obama wants. He's making it sound like Obama wants equality of outcomes, whereas he is going to be equality of opportunity.
Right.
Do people actually think that Obama wants equality of outcomes?
Well, he definitely wants them more equal, no? I mean, tends to focus on income inequality?
I think so, but I mean, what you're getting from Romney is that Obama wants everybody to make the same exact amount of money and have the same exact job, and it sounds awfully Soviet. And I just don't think you can point to anything that Obama said that equals that.
Well, I mean, if you look at the focus, how he's pitching it,
it's kind of like the apologizing for America part. It never really happened.
He's pitching it as more of people's incomes need to be more equal, right? I mean, wouldn't that be the point of fighting income inequality? Is having people's income be more similar to each other's, have more incomes be more equal?
Well, yes, but also equality of opportunity to move up in the world, and I think this gets back into the mobility thing, where we're talking about, can people, if they do the right thing, improve their lot in life, and growing inequality potentially will slow that down.
Right. No, and I think when you look at Romney's rhetoric, he's casting it as a European social welfare state versus a opportunity society, which is exactly how Paul Ryan's been framing it for months. So I think this is a ongoing conservative frame that we have a choice between having a overregulated, slow growth economy where it's hard to get new jobs or transfer or innovate, versus a more American model where it is easier to create more jobs, change fields, innovate, and more economic growth.
I just wonder how much of that is actually happening and how much of that is a is a boogeyman that Romney has dug up.
Yeah. What do you mean? I mean, we definitely.
I mean, it just seems like Obama's pretty standard, moderately center-left Democrat on most of these things, and yet Romney is portraying him as this, big, scary European welfare state, bringing France to the U.S. kind of guy.
Well, let's look at
and I just wonder how much of that is true. And I totally get the politics of it.
Let's look at
obviously, the politics of it play great. But I find it kind of disingenuous.
Well, let's look at Obama's signature domestic accomplishment, right? Healthcare. Instead of having a market-based approach, which would allow Americans to organize
because that terrible non-market-based approach derived by the Heritage Foundation.
Are you working on something else?
And since rejected by the Heritage Foundation. But let's dig a little deeper. Instead of allowing people to organize their healthcare services through health savings accounts, or through insuring themselves, or through developing clinics at Walmart, or letting other companies come in on the healthcare market. Instead, we're focusing everything into insurance companies, heavily regulating them, basically turning them into utilities, and basically crushing all medical innovation altogether. I mean, you can't have small companies or large companies even
I think you're actually going to swing full circle here and end up agreeing on healthcare.
I don't see how.
That's how the way this is going to go down.
Well, no, but don't you agree that that Obamacare will basically create a small set of utility-like insurance companies that will dominate how insurance or how healthcare is delivered in this country?
I mean, I'm honestly not a healthcare expert. It's not really my field, but I see he worked within the existing framework to get as many people insured as he could. And I think it's a big problem, and it's a sorry state of affairs that framework is the way it is, and that we have the kind of insurance company monopoly that we have. But if he was not going to blow up that framework, which I think would have been very difficult, then you kind of had to come up with Obamacare because it was the only way to do it with staying within the system that we kind of have.
Yeah, I just don't think that's
I'm not sure that
answer.
equals socialism.
Well, no, it's not exactly Castro's Cuba, but it's a step in that direction. I mean, if we look at a continuum of free markets versus everything rationed by central government, it's definitely closer to that full rationing mindset, right?
I don't know that it's rationing. It's working within the private insurance system that we've had for a long time. And if he's not gonna blow that up, and I mean I agree with you that the way we get, I bet I agree with you.
Who did?
The way we get healthcare through our employer and it's not a personal choice is a big problem. But if we weren't going to blow that up, then I think we have to go where we ended up.
Fair enough. How about if we look, specifically policy-wise? Talking Points Memo had a great post earlier this week talking with some experts on how ineffective Obama's policies would be at maintaining income inequality. I mean, you look at that Kruger speech and he talks about how great the 90s were, but what he leaves out is that income inequality grew throughout the 90s. So what exactly do you look at when you look at Obama's policies have any prayer of reducing income inequality?
I mean, you're looking at the tax side, you're looking at the healthcare side. I agree that he's going to have to...
Well, let's say we go back to the Clinton rates. Do you think going back to the Clinton rates will stop income inequality growth? It didn't during the 90s. Income inequality growth
certainly isn't going to hurt.
Well, but it's not going to do anything to address the problem. I mean, like I said, income inequality grew through the 90s with the Clinton rates.
No, I think you're right. I think he hasn't quite gotten there on a package that's going to address it. And I'm actually interested on what some of your... Actually, I guess the question is, do you think this is a problem worth addressing? And if so, what would you do to address it?
Oh, well, I think, the conservatives and Republicans look at it just from completely different frames, that we need more opportunity. We need, less regulations that hamper businesses. I guess we can skip ahead, kind of, and look at Keystone today. Here you have the
great Keystone punt, if you will.
Right. Here we have a government regulation, NEPA, which is being used by the environmental lobby to thwart private infrastructure, which would create thousands of jobs. I actually think conservatives are making a big mistake on this issue.
And I was actually going to ask, I mean, I think politically the House Republicans have kind of botched this whole fiasco, and they were actually more interested in getting their couple months of talking points than in actually getting the pipeline done. But be that as it may.
Right. Well, I think 20,000 jobs is 20,000 jobs, but I think they are missing the larger issue, which is NEPA in general. Here we have a statute that came along in 1969 and has significantly slowed both private and public infrastructure since then. The U.S. Chamber came out with a great study last year showing how NEPA delays hundreds of billions of dollars in both private and public infrastructure every year. This is a major slower to economic growth. And what the House Republicans haven't done is they haven't taken used the Keystone Pipeline as an issue to elevate NEPA and call for more environmental regulatory reform. Instead, they've just narrowed it to one exception for one project, which I think is just a big waste and just extreme oversight on their part.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I think on both sides that everybody got so focused on this one little project that we all kind of missed the forest for the trees, if you will.
Has ThinkProgress, does CAP have a position on Keystone where they, because it definitely divided the left here. You had Labor putting up ads for it, putting up a website. This is Hollywood elites who are pushing this. But then of course you had literally Hollywood elites. Daryl Hannah and a whole bunch of other people that were very strongly against it. And Obama has had a choice between two rival constituencies, and he chose
to not choose.
No, he pretty clearly chose the environmental one.
You think so? I mean, I'm actually, in a couple of months, I think we're going to be right back here talking about the same thing again. And that's actually why I think the House Republicans kind of botched this, because we're just going to be going in circles on this one particular project, which kind of misses the point.
What was
I think we were against the project.
Okay.
On environmental grounds, but I think actually what I was going to say is that I think where the left is kind of missing the forest for the trees on this is that one pipeline is not going to stop global warming. And so if we wanted to talk about this within a bigger kind of climate change carbon framework, there was an opportunity there that just whooshed right on by because we were so focused on this one particular pipeline in this one spot. And I think that was a missed opportunity to talk about bigger things because, again, this one pipeline, build it or don't build it, is not going to change the climate change situation by itself.
Agreed. But yeah, this is just one example. Environmental regulations are just one area. We also have OSHA, various labor requirements, minimum wages, healthcare regulations, which we touched on.
We agreed a lot. Now I think we're diverging again. We had a good 4 minutes of agreement there.
These are all areas where the federal government gets in the way of the churning of the market of job creation. Yeah, well, I mean, you asked my viewpoint. This is it, and I believe that the greatest way to to fight income inequality, the greatest way to provide for mobility is for there to be jobs out there, so that people can get jobs. Steady job helps families, it keeps families together, allows for kids to grow up in an environment where there's two parents. So I think in the environment where we allow for maximum job creation will help income mobility and fight income inequality.
I think the problem is that then you get into kind of a race to the bottom, ensure their jobs, or what kind of jobs are they? And if we're talking about income inequality, then kind of bottom end, low wage, no benefit jobs are just going to make the inequality problem worse.
I mean, does that really matter? Isn't a job better than no job? I mean, especially for keeping someone,
yes.
especially for keeping someone, active in society, waking up every day, going to work every day, staying in healthy habits, as opposed to just, sitting on the couch, doing nothing, letting their skills atrophy, etc.
Well, that's a different problem, but I mean, yes.
No, it's the same. How is that a different problem?
Well, there's a societal problem to allowing owners and managers pay workers nothing and give them no benefits and have them toiling in whatever sort of unsafe conditions. I mean, you need to have proper restraints on this kind of stuff, or you do just get a race to the bottom. And yes, a job where you have no benefits and make almost no money and are working in potentially unsafe conditions could, at the end of the day, be much worse than no job.
Well, but if that were true, why
if we're talking about long term, not only to grow in the economy, what kind of economy we want to have.
Okay, but let's look at an example of this. You have a more highly regulated economy, which has much more land use regulations, much higher taxes, much more generous benefits in California that is not producing any jobs, and people are fleeing the state in droves. And then you have some place like Texas, which I am sure, according to your description, has a bunch of race to the bottom, terrible jobs, and yet
it has a lot of oil jobs.
And
actually, I mean, it has the highest percentage of minimum wage jobs in the nation.
Right. These are the type of jobs that you think are terrible, and yet people were voting with their feet and moving to Texas and out of California.
California's a basket case for a lot of reasons.
I'm a native Californian. I agree with you. Right, but so what do you say to that? I mean, why not let people choose?
Because of course, people are going to choose to get something when the option is nothing. The market is just imperfect in that way, and there can be a market failure in terms of racing to the bottom. And so I think it is our both moral and eventually economic responsibility to prevent that sort of thing from happening.
Okay. Speaking of market failures,
it sounds like I sold you. It sounds like you're totally on board.
Oh yeah.
You're gonna come over here to ThinkProgress tomorrow.
You guys do have a beautiful building. But
you should see our new office, one new floor. It's very
yeah? Well, maybe I can get a tour someday. Speaking of market failures, you wanted to talk about housing.
I did want to talk about housing. We've seen some good and some bad numbers in the last couple of months. Good number is that foreclosures have hit their lowest point since 2007. And we've seen some analysts say that they think the bottom is within sight, that we might see a rebound in housing. And housing is one of those things that just, I personally think until we get a handle on that, until that market is sorted out, we're not going to see much in terms of recovery for a lot of reasons, which we can get into. So that's the kind of good news. The kind of bad news is that the New York Federal Reserve is estimating that there will be 3.5 million foreclosures in the next 2 years. which, like I said, is a problem. I think recovery is going to have a big anchor on it as long as housing keeps being in the shape that it's in.
Okay, a lot there on that we can agree and disagree on. I mean, I definitely agree that the housing problem has been a huge suck on recovery. I think it makes it a lot harder for people who are stuck in houses.
If we're talking about moving for jobs, if you're underwater, you can't go.
Right. You see where I'm going here.
Yeah.
In the actual churn of the market, it becomes a lot harder for people to move. Just as a personal example, I had a family friend who was living in a house in South Carolina when the market burst, and they got a new job up in Virginia. And they almost had to give up on it. They eventually just actually moved in with a friend, but they were having trouble moving up here because they couldn't sell their house in South Carolina.
I was talking to someone the other day doing some reporting on this, and it was the same thing. A woman living in Baltimore got a job in Virginia, and couldn't get out because the condo she bought in Baltimore is now a fraction of what it once was. And there's just no way to go.
No, right. You can't sell it, or you take a huge loss. You can't take the loss now. So yeah, I think
you could be trying to go to Texas or California. If you can't get out of your house, you can't get out of your house.
Right. Now I think where we're going to disagree is on the solutions to that. You mentioned foreclosures and all those future foreclosures being a problem. Whereas I'm probably closer to Mitt Romney's view, which is
let it hit bottom.
Yeah, there's going to be some pain, but and we can there are ways to mitigate that pain. But
I guess the question that jumps to mind is what do you think of Glenn Hubbard's refi idea? And for the people who
go for how about you go ahead
and don't know what I'm talking about, Glenn Hubbard, who's actually a Romney economic advisor. Has suggested refinancing homeowners who are current but who are underwater into new mortgages to try and take advantage of new low rates as a stimulus/economic recovery program. Is the short version of it.
Right. Again, I think it's a great idea. I think there are a couple of problems with it. One, I don't know how much it would actually fix. Because it doesn't, it's just a refi plan. It doesn't deal with principal, and the problem really is the underwater.
I agree that principal is
so I don't think it would. I just don't think it would fix the problem. I think it would help some people, and it does it in a. I like the fact that they make these instead of having, because the old refi programs, you all had to show that you were delinquent first. Whereas this one, it's the opposite. You have to show that you're current in order to qualify. I like that aspect of it.
We could probably spend the next 2 hours talking about all the kinks and problems with the various housing programs. I think this is one of actually Obama's biggest failures. Has been the housing market, and I bet we agree for different reasons. But HAMP has been a mess. The Home Affordable Modification Program. The other programs that have come out have not been any better. And they really have just failed to grapple with this, and they had the resources and they had the chance and they didn't do it. And I think it's been like I said before, an anchor on the economy since they came into office, and obviously beforehand. But they had a chance to work on it and they didn't.
So what do you think should happen?
I like the refi idea. You're gonna roll your eyes and sigh, but some principal reduction I think is in order. I think there are ways to fashion a program that would be both fair and acknowledge that a lot of people are in the situation they're in, not because they community reinvestment acted their way into houses they couldn't afford, but because a financial crisis happened, and that's the way it goes. And the reason I think this is a good idea is because if we're looking at things from the demand side, this frees up money to spend elsewhere, and hopefully you get a good cycle of demand built up because people are no longer having to plow tons of money into their mortgage. They can go out and do something with it that's a little more stimulative.
Right. Again, for me, it's more of it's more of aligning interests better so that people can get on with their lives, whether it's the people that are stuck in homes they don't want to be in, or neighborhoods that have a whole bunch of properties that are limbo. I think the main value is
and that's another problem, is that if you don't get this problem not only hurts the person who's in the house and involved, this hurts the whole neighborhood. If you see the kind of blighted neighborhoods that we have, foreclosures dragging down home value across neighborhoods, this is the sort of thing where I know a lot of the plans that come out, it looks like you are helping people who behave badly. And you're inevitably going to get some of that any way you try and spin one of these problems. You're going to be rewarding some people who didn't do the right thing. But I think the kind of broader good that a foreclosure hurts not just the person living in the house, but the person next door and down the street and around the corner is a good reason to do this sort of thing.
Right, and one thing, you keep talking about people who've gotten this no fault of their own. I think progressives and even some conservatives often underestimate how many of these foreclosed and in trouble properties are investment properties, people who never lived in these properties, people who were, speculating and trying to flip houses, and how much of a problem
I think that's interesting, yeah.
I'm sorry?
I think that's an interesting point, yeah, and I think that is something that does not get a lot of attention, and we don't actually have a ton of good data on it.
We have some good data. I think what we do have shows that there are a lot of these properties are investment properties. These are not homes that people live in, and that just makes the argument on clearing the market through some type of bailout or principal reduction that much harder to sell politically, because no one wants to reward someone. I mean, the case for someone who moved into a new. Let's just say someone who moved to like San Jose, California, and the market's through the roof, and they got a new job and they're a family and they're trying to save it. That's one thing, but then bailing out someone who was borrowing to fund 5 different condos in Las Vegas. That's just a different sell.
Yeah, yeah. You're totally right. I'm not going to fight you on that one at all.
But it would be better if it didn't have...
Okay. So do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we got through our list there.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Patrick. Hopefully we'll be able to do this again soon.
It's been a pleasure. Anytime.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Yep.
Bye.